In a disaster recovery scenario, there are many different pieces to consider. The Veritas Resiliency Platform can automate the entire DR process and make things simple. I want to talk a bit about the different components involved with the VRP system, as well as some of the ways the Resiliency Platform can move data between sites. So starting here with our Resiliency Manager, this is sort of the overall operations manager for our Resiliency Platform environment. There's a few different pieces here that are part of the Resiliency Manager. First thing is our database. So this is where essentially everything is stored. We also have our services. So these are the utilities that essentially run the Resiliency Platform environment. And this includes things like authentication, also authorization, also things like logging, reporting as well. And the big one here is actually called the workflow service. So we'll look a bit more detail at what happens here with the workflow, but overall, how would we connect and how would the data flow within this system? So we would log on to a typical browser. We would then connect to the web service and the Resiliency Manager, which also manages our web-based user interface. We would initiate some sort of action within the system. That would be something like a migration, a takeover, or potentially even a DR rehearsal. That's a scenario where Resiliency Platform is actually able to bring up systems it's managing in an isolated network so they can be tested. So we log in, we initiate some sort of action. Resiliency Platform generates a workflow service. This would include the steps involved in executing an operation, as well as the order that those steps need to be executed in. So we would then come down here and talk to our infrastructure management server. This is essentially the workhorse of the Resiliency Platform environment that goes and connects to our assets, which are the systems we're managing. So we'd connect in here to our infrastructure management server. This would execute some sort of action. We would then have the result returned through the infrastructure management server. This would be a pass-fail type of thing, and that result would be stored up here in the database and could then be reported on later. I also want to talk a bit about how the replication works between sites. So you'll see here that the database is actually replicating to another Resiliency Manager database at another site. And this is done automatically within the Resiliency Platform environment. It's set up for you when you do the install. The other option that we have here within a VMware environment is something called a Replication Gateway, also known as a data mover for VMware. And this is a VRP component that has the ability to filter I/O using a plugin here installed at the hypervisor level that can intercept data coming from a VM going to its disk, and we can intercept that data and then replicate this data across to another site. The Replication Gateway is installed inside a VMware HA cluster and can be on any one of the ESX hosts within that cluster. The other option we offer within a VMware environment is integration with native storage technologies. This would include all the major storage vendors out there. So we can actually communicate with that storage, and we can initiate a native storage replication process to move data from one side to the other. The other option we have is to integrate with NetBackup. So we can actually initiate via the infrastructure management server a NetBackup air copy from one NetBackup domain to another, where an image here on our primary site can be replicated using NetBackup Air or automatic image replication and then restored at the alternate site. One other thing that's kind of interesting is we can also integrate with VOM, V-I-O-M, or Veritas InfoScale Operations Manager, and we can orchestrate the operations of an InfoScale availability cluster configured with the global cluster option. That can also be done using native storage replication supported by the InfoScale availability solution. All of this can be managed within one platform and can be configured to be executed with as little as one click.